In 2019, Rode microphones triggered a domino effect with their first wireless go. It set off a whole new category of small wireless microphones, and around 2 years later, the OG themselves are back with a version 2, and it's quite the upgrade over the version 1. I can narrow this down to 5 major improvements. There's actually more to it because these 5 are the truly big upgrades, but we'll address the minor ones as well along the way. So major upgrades are things like having one more transmitter over the version 1, yet on the receiving end, it's still a similarly small receiver handling both channels. In fact, the transmitters and receivers on the version 2 are exactly the same size as the version 1s, but the receiver being dual channel now, I fully expected it to at least get heavier. But it wasn't, it was even like 0.3 grams lighter. But you get 2 output modes. The first splits each transmitter's signal into the left and right output channels, the other mixes down the 2 into a merged signal. There's nothing, however, on the transmitters themselves to help you visually differentiate which one's transmitter number 1 and which is number 2, so if you feel a need to identify your transmitters, you'll have to label them yourself. But there you have it, you can now mic 2 people without having to get 2 wireless Go kits, and considering all the other upgrades that we're about to get into, you can bet one wireless Go 2 is better and cheaper than 2 wireless Go 1s, because the wireless Go 2 has a much improved wireless connection over the first generation. This will make a difference both in range and signal stability. It was one of the main quirks with the original wireless Go, which didn't take much before its signal began to drop out. The main big difference that I noticed is the improved ability of the signal from the version 2 to penetrate obstacles. I've got the transmitters of both the wireless Go versions 1 and 2 on me. The receiver's back over there with you guys on the camera. I also picked the perfect day and weather to do this test. But anyway, I'm not really that far away from the camera, but even at this distance, on the version 1, even my hand in front of the transmitter is enough to block the signal. So, and between the transmitter and receiver. If I switch over to the version 2, you're now listening to the version 2, and if I put my hand in front of the transmitter, you can hear that's not really doing much to the signal. Even if I turn my body around and put my entire body between the transmitter and the receiver, we're still getting a really good signal. And this is about as far back as I can get with the version 1 before the signal becomes unusably wonky. So if I start stepping away from the camera, we should start experiencing dropouts, which I think should be happening right now. You're supposed to hear my voice start chopping up. And this is how far back I can get on the version 2. It's a slight improvement over the version 1, but it's actually not that much further if we've got line of sight. But however, if I continue moving backwards and force it to go out of range, which I think should be happening right about now, the camera can't hear me, but you can still hear me because you're listening to a backup recording being recorded right here on my transmitter. Which brings me to major upgrade number 3. Internal recording. This feature is disabled by default, so you do need to enable it first through the Rode Central software. Rode Central will also be where we review and export these recordings because they are recording onto inbuilt storage. There's no micro SD card slot or anything like that. Once internal recording is enabled, the transmitters will begin recording once they've established a connection to the receiver. As of current, there is no way to manually start or stop the recording. The way it records is quite similar to a security camera or a car's dash cam. It keeps recording continuously. If it runs out of storage, it will begin overriding the oldest clips and the cycle runs on. If you power the transmitter down or if it detects the receiver powering off, it will stop the recording. So how much audio can you hold in one of these? Well, certainly enough for you to offload them before they get overwritten. It's over 40 hours if you record them compressed. You also have the option of uncompressed recording, which will last around 7 hours. From my testing, compressed and uncompressed did not sound a whole lot different, so it's perfectly okay to be recording in compressed. Although if you're planning to run the audio through a fair bit of post-processing, uncompressed is probably the way to go since it then records at a sample rate of 48 kHz as a 24-bit WAV file. I think it would have been really nice if there was an option to manually trigger recording or even have a recording indicator on the transmitter itself, something like a red LED. At the moment, the only indicator is over here on the receiver. You will see a red icon above any transmitters that are recording. I also find it a little unfortunate that the transmitters could not record independent of the receiver. I mentioned that they start recording once they're connected to a receiver, so when you power them on without a receiver active, they don't begin recording until a receiver shows up. But judging by the way the internal recording function's been implemented, it was really meant as a backup and not a primary recording method. That would also explain quite a number of design decisions that were made with regards to internal recording on this. But internal recording is not the only ass-saving feature added to the Wireless Go 2 because we also get safety channel now. Again, it's something that needs to be first enabled from Rode Central. It also only works in merged output mode, otherwise there simply won't be enough channels to make that happen. This feature is something that's being applied at the output level on the receiver. It outputs 2 channels of the exact same signal, only one side is 20 decibels softer. Now, because this is something that's being applied at the output stage, it will not be able to recover a signal that was already distorted before it reaches the receiver. Say, for example, you yell really loud into the transmitter mic and the signal clips. What that's really useful for is having that softer backup channel in case a loud spike in the signal overloads the input on your camera. And number 5 is one of the biggest upgrades to the system, but also one of the most discreet. The Wireless Go 2 can now output over USB. This addition makes it so much more practical to use the Wireless Go 2 with mobile devices and computers. The receiver has a USB Type-C port, so you just need the right cable to connect it to your device and you have essentially a wireless USB microphone. For iPhones and some iPads, you will need the SC15, which is a USB-C to Lightning cable. But this USB connectivity is a huge upgrade for a number of reasons. First of which is how it's sending the audio to your device as a fully digital signal that would generally result in better audio quality because it's bypassing your device's analog to digital converters. But beyond sound quality, recording over USB also lets you split the 2 transmitters onto their own separate channels. That's not possible if you run a TRRS connector into the headphone jack because the input on those are mono. The single cable solution is also a fair lot more elegant. It's very convenient as well for making content on mobile phones, and for computers, it's also extremely handy for video conferencing. A few more improvements that are really nice additions but wouldn't quite consider to be massive upgrades are some little quality of life tweaks, like a new and improved windshield mount. The old design wasn't exactly the most secure, it kept falling out and it really wasn't everyone's favorite. But this new design, you simply push it in and rotate to lock it, like mounting a camera lens. The cable it ships with also got a bit of a change. It's now this stiff type shape holding cable, similar to the one you get with the VideoMic NTG. On the version 1, it was a little coiled cable. You can also now enable fine gain control on the receiver, so instead of 3 somewhat ambiguous output levels, we now get a 10-step adjustment with clearly labeled 3 decibel increments. Now, are there things on this that I think could still be better? Well, certainly so. The audio quality from the built-in microphones appears to be unchanged from the version 1. It's not bad, you've been listening to it for this whole video, but I was kind of hoping for an upgrade in that area for the version 2. They've also introduced the new Rode Central software, which is cool, but it's currently only available on Mac and PC, meaning if you would like to change settings on your Wireless Go units or access the internal recordings, you can't do that unless you have access to a computer. It would be awesome if there was a smartphone version of Rode Central for doing these things on the fly. The Wireless Go 2 is selling for $299, which is $100 more than the version 1. But considering all the upgrades plus an extra transmitter on the version 2, I think it's absolutely worth the $100 over the version 1. Is it then worth upgrading from the version 1? Well, I'm seeing at least 5 improvements that I personally consider to be major. So the answer is yes, I think it's worth upgrading to this from the version 1. So those are my thoughts on the new Wireless Go 2. I'll leave purchase links below for anyone interested, and here's a couple more of my reviews if you feel like seeing more of my very average face.